Welcome back to GraveyardDance.com. I hope you're all doing well out there and have been taking the time to go into our page, clicking videos and hopefully scrolling back and checking out our past work if you haven't already. We're coming upon a year now and have quite the catalog of work that I hope you'll take the time to watch and hopefully like and share with your friends and family. With that said, on to today's story. Finding a local church to attend is a great way to find inner peace and to work on and figure out what your own personal inner spiritual beliefs are. Finding the right one will hopefully lead to your own enlightenment and spiritual healing. But, what happens when you find the wrong one? Sometimes the people who are there to help save your soul can be wolves in sheep's clothing and become the ones to instead, destroy it. Edmund Creffield, or Joshua as he liked to be called, was just one of those people. He was originally from Germany but somehow migrated to the Portland, Oregon area sometime in the year 1903. He soon got involved in the Salvation Army. Back in those early days around the turn of the century, they were more of a church than a charitable organization. They were founded on the Protestant belief. He offered his services to the church and they sent him on a mission to Corvallis. They had sent him there to spread the message of their church, but Joshua's ideas of what was right or wrong and the church's ideas didn't go hand in hand. He decided to break away from the Salvation Army and start his own church based on his own interpretations of the Bible. Uh-oh, this already doesn't sound good, does it? The fact that he was on the batshit crazy side of things definitely didn't help matters any. A cult was being born. Most of the townspeople saw it for what it was. This is where the derogatory term, holy rollers, comes from. The group would roll on the floors for hours and speak in languages no one could understand for hours, which if you stop to think about it, had never been done before. It must have really scared the local town's residents who were more used to a more calm or normal church sermon. There were a few who were curious enough to get sucked in though. It didn't start out like that though. It began normal enough. Creffield began preaching the Bible in a way that was somewhat close to what he was originally taught, with one huge difference. He soon started telling his followers that he was receiving messages directly from God himself. You'd think this would be enough for people to roll their eyes and say, "Oh boy, his cheese has slid off his cracker," and to walk away, but they didn't know. They didn't have internet or cable TV to show them all the frauds there were out there, even though the Bible does talk about there being false prophets. This was all new to them, so they probably believed it, especially the more easily duped of the town's population. His sermons were loud. Not just him, but his congregation. They would roll and yell on the floor all hours of the night and well into the morning. It was such a disturbance to the town's people's sleep that he was made to move his church out of the town's city limits. During the summer months, they lived on an island in the middle of the Willamette River called Keegar Island, which spanned about 2,200 acres. It wouldn't be for long though. A single mother of 3 children named Sarah Hurd, who was in the congregation, invited Joshua and about 20 followers to move into her home. Bad idea. Very bad. Within a month of moving in, they took all of her things outside and set them ablaze. Yep, you heard right. They set her things on fire. All her nicest furniture, personal belongings, things left down from her family. They even killed the family's dog and cat and threw them on the fire as well. There were some reports that later came back false that they had even sacrificed a baby in the fire. With screwballs like this, it wouldn't surprise me anywho. The people of Corvallis was starting to get a little worried about the town's new preacher. Other than Sarah's sons, they realized that almost the entire congregation were all very young girls. The way he acted around them and touched them made many of the town's people furious. They didn't believe any part of him being a man of God or having their spiritual health in mind. They knew what he was up to and wasn't going to stand for it. In early 1904, a gang of about 20 vigilantes who called themselves the White Caps found Joshua out by himself and decided a little mob vengeance was in order. Just so we don't get our video flagged, I have to note a disclaimer here. We here at Graveyard Dance does not in any way, shape or form promote the idea of vigilantism. With that said, they tar and feathered him. That's where you pour boiling hot tar on someone in an act of revenge. Joshua was a shaggy-haired fella up until this point. It burned off all his hair and some of his skin. You'd think this would be enough to make him feel unwelcome, as they demanded he leave town and never come back, but either it was his stubbornness or the lure of living with all those girls that blocked his common sense. Not only did he not leave, he even married Maud, which was Sarah's daughter, the one who allowed him to move in the day after being lynched. Married life didn't mean the same to Josh as it does most folks. Just days after being married, a warrant was put out for him for having an adulterous affair with Sarah's sister and Maud's aunt, Donna Starr. In those days, you could be arrested for that. Weird, huh? Moving on. While the law was looking for Joshua, his followers were rounded up and most of them were sent to the Oregon State Insane Asylum or the Boys and Girls Aid Society in Portland. Can you imagine what they must have been like to have them literally lock up almost all of them? They claim that most of them would lay on the floor and roll around in the absence of Joshua and pray for his return while starving themselves to death the entire time. That's just creepy as heck! By July, Sarah, the woman who had invited them and was locked up as well. That same month, they found Joshua naked and starving under her house. He claimed he was innocent, but the law didn't agree. They gave him 17 months in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Being locked up didn't do anything to rehabilitate him. If anything, he came out nuttier than before. When he was released, he no longer claimed Jesus talked through him. He now claimed that he was Jesus and his resurrection was him being released from prison. Oh, what? He even claimed that he was responsible for the horrific 1906 earthquake of San Francisco. His followers of course all believed him. By that spring, one of his followers' husbands had it all he could take of Joshua. His wife Cora believed in Creffield wholeheartedly and wanted her husband and Louis and daughter Sophie to meet him, as she believed he was Christ reincarnated. Louis had other ideas though. He took along a revolver, a small gun which was loaded incorrectly, and when he spotted Joshua, he took out his gun and aimed and fired. Being loaded wrong, of course nothing happened. It did scare Joshua badly enough to take his group of followers and move to Seattle, where he wasn't so well known. After 2 attempts on his life, he knew he would be a goner if he didn't. It didn't do him any good though. He underestimated just how badly he was hated among his followers' families and loved ones. One of his followers named Esther had a brother named George Mitchell who had just so happened to be one of those people. He shot him dead as soon as he got to town. The district attorney of Multnomah County, a man named John Manning, wrote to the prosecuting attorney, a man by the name of Kenneth McIntosh, a letter that read, "I investigated many charges against him while he was on his holy rolling tour in Oregon, the character of which were perfectly awful, insofar as being low, degenerate and brutal, and if permitted, I would like an opportunity to testify before the grand jury, before Mitchell is indicted. I think the taking of the law in one's own hands, under such circumstances, to mete out summary justice is almost excusable." McIntosh didn't agree. In a strange twist, Creffield's own father-in-law, a man by the name of O.V. Hurt, spent his own money to defend George Mitchell in the murder case against his son-in-law. This guy seriously was not liked by many at all. Several witnesses at the trial testified that they had told George about free love being held at the church services. In other words, they were all getting together and for the sake of kids watching, you get the idea. Joshua was using his church as a way to have relations with all his female followers and telling them that Christ would be reborn and one of the brides of Christ would be the new Mary, and that he needed to lay his hands upon them and purify them. Can you imagine, even by today's standards, how pissed you'd be if your sister or daughter got involved and brainwashed by a guy like this? Imagine how much worse it had to be back then with the standards of the day. They said they told George that mothers were debauched in front of their daughters, including Sarah and her then 16-year-old daughter, May. They said they told George that finally Creffield announced that the new Mary was Esther Mitchell, the then 16-year-old sister of George. He was put on trial for Joshua's murder and found not guilty. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but not quite. Esther, as it turns out, didn't want to be rescued. 2 days after the trial, Esther shot her brother to death with a gun bought by Maud. O.V. Hurt, the man who had spent all the money to defend George, hired the same attorney to defend his young daughter. She too was found not guilty by reason of insanity of murder, but was sent to Western State Hospital, an asylum in Stelicum, Washington. She was released in 1909, but took her own life in 1914. After Joshua's death, the church dissolved, but no one really knows what became of most of their congregation. Were they ever released from the insane asylum? Did they ever become deprogrammed and go on to live a normal life? I hope so. If you like today's stories, we hope you'll give us a thumbs up. Hit that notification bell and check out our social links below. We appreciate every view and share. We love hearing from you. Till next time.